Hello everyone, and welcome to this live stream. I think everything should be going as planned. Please let me know in the comments if the stream quality is good. It should be, I think, 2K at least. It's a downscale from a 4K stream, so hopefully that is good. I'm not sure exactly how this works. And please also let me know how the sound is, if that is good or not. I need to adjust if it's not. I haven't done live streaming in a while, so that's why. And I also need to prepare the stream quickly, the stream windows. So let me give some time to do that. So the chat should be coming up in the stream window. Just make it a bit smaller, maybe like this. Sound is great. That's good to know. All right. And let's do this smaller. Okay, so is it 2K? Can you see it in 2K, or is it 1K? What is the resolution you guys can choose from? Okay, so because I have a 2K warning from YouTube. Got a new member. Thank you very much, Ballas Banix, I think. Thank you very much. I think you're actually the very first member on my new membership channel here on YouTube. Thank you, thank you for joining. Okay, 1080, huge fan, cool. All right, 1080, that's perfect. It's a bit delayed, I guess, but that's all fine. Okay, as you can see in my little big thumbnail there, I have this interior lighting setup, and this will not be fully about just that. I just want to talk a bit more about the about how to get there, actually, how to set up OpenColor.io, which should be actually, all that should be pretty much straightforward, and how to set up ACES workflow, which is a bit more tricky, and even I'm not a pro in all that. So if I talk anything which does not make sense or it's wrong, please let me know. I'm still learning this whole color pipeline thing. It's a bit much, honestly. It shouldn't be, but it is. All right, so I think we can start almost. Let's see what's happening. Just one more quick glance of things all as expected. 64 viewers. Welcome everyone. So feel free to show to leave a comment where you're from, so I can say hello. I started on purpose a bit more early, so I can capture the biggest spectrum of people. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Okay, so this is, I think we're good to go. Let's close this guy. We don't really care about this. All right, so let me see. So I will first share a few links, and it's definitely better before you get going into all of this to read it, and well after the video, I guess. All right, so I will do this. So Hungary, welcome. India, Moldova, India, Taiwan. Oh, well, everywhere. Cool. So Arnold cannot handle caustics. It's not a bidirectional path tracer, so that is not happening. And it is automatically uploaded after the stream. All right, so anyways, let's get going. So as you can see, there's lots of tabs open here, which display like ACES stuff, right? So one thing is OpenColor.io, which is pretty much a standard to always have the exact same color pipelines for all your different DCCs. And a DCC is any software package you would have, something like Nuke or Mari or Maya or what, all these different things. They all, or most of them nowadays, support OpenColor.io. And this is just a framework to bring in different color LUTs, lookup tables, and all these different things, P3 gamuts and whatnot, right? So all these things are very cryptic. There's lots of going on, and I will try to really just run it down. What is more a simple thing, or at least simple to me how I understand it. And I'm not saying I fully understand anything about color. It's a crazy thing. There's lots of PhDs working in this field, so definitely a tricky thing. So what I would recommend is I will share these links here, just to see actually what's going on. And you can see this, you will quite often see this weird color thing. And this just displays the color range which different kind of color profiles can achieve. And you can see sRGB is the most common one used throughout, but it's very limited. So you can see it's actually cutting off here. This middle triangle is what you would see in the sRGB color spectrum, right? And I think we have a bit better display somewhere. Yeah, let's see if we can make this. So this, for instance, shows a bit better. sRGB is the red triangle in the middle, which is very limited, and it feels like color is being clamped away. So the rendering process cannot fully utilize all the information in the texture, right? So it can only read up till this point, and then whatever is after this is fully ignored. So whatever comes after 0.6 in Y and below 0.3 is kind of cut off. You can see that the ACES workflow pretty much covers all of the spectrum, the visible spectrum at least, and it can pass that to the render engine. And that is very important to understand, that the data is not clamped or limited to the render engine. And this is what it's all about. And it's the same for film cameras. They capture more color, more range. So in DI and post-processing, whatever, they can color correct it more. They have more range to play with. So again, I'm not 100% familiar with all this, but this is at least how much I understand it. So I will be pasting those links in the chat now, and I would really, if you want to get into this, really recommend you guys reading this, checking it out. It just helps a lot to at least get a better picture of all this. Then we have, I'm just pasting all of them, so you can save them, open them, whatever you want to do with this. Okay, so that's pretty much all I had to do about explaining what well, not fully, but the benefit is. But okay, let's just keep going a bit more. So the thing now is the render, like I'm using Arnold in this case. So when you pass it on a ACES color corrected or an ACES converted texture, it is pretty much a lot darker than it's supposed to be, or than you would think is correct. But then the benefit of having darker textures is you can boost the lights in your CG scene. And the benefit of doing that is that the renderer has more energy or more light samples to process. So, and that way it can actually generate a better, how would I say it, a better indirect lighting. It knows it has more data in the indirect lighting. It can bounce off more surfaces. There's definitely more energy traveling. And in the real world, for instance, there is no limit, right? There is no color limit. Everything bounces infinitely, infinite long or infinite enough time. So, and we're just trying to mimic all that with the renderer. So this is a step forward to get more accurate results. So I just had to take a little sip here. And you can see there's different kind of color spaces. So we, as I said, we are used to using sRGB, and I will be using DCP3 as a lookup, like a view transform, which is pretty much still using the ACES workflow behind the scenes, but on top it's just displaying it in this DCI-P3 range. It's a bit wider than you would than it's used to. So the default images you would render are a bit more washed out and everything like that. Yeah, so the question was, is it really right to linearize diffuse albedo maps? So that's a good question, and I cannot answer it truthfully or not fully. So if you have a texture in sRGB space, you would just convert it to ACES-CG, which is pretty much linearizing the image. It's almost like just a raw conversion, and you pipe the raw conversion into the renderer. So that is the idea of this. If you capture textures properly with an ACES device, or with a device which can capture the full gamut, or at least 10-bit, then if you save these textures as a high range texture, like a 16-bit texture, or even you can go further, but then it's honestly a proper ACES CG workflow, which I just cannot do because I don't have my camera could do it. I've got the Nikon Z6, which captures, I think, 12-bit. So you could use that to capture textures and convert those to ACES CG. So I think that would be the proper approach. It's definitely very convoluted and time consuming to generate all this. So Color IO, let's just jump into this. As I said before, it's a pipeline, it's a framework. I think it's developed by ImageWorks by Sony. And on their website, even though it looks like it's outdated, this 2 years ago version, ACES 1.03, is the current standard which most of the packages use. I know for a fact that Nuke uses that. You can see you get these same things down here, the lookup tables or the view transforms. So most of this is based of ACES, right? And how can you get it to work? So you have different options. If you have Nuke installed, Nuke ships with that Open Color IO thing. So you could then open, for instance, you could open up Maya and just open up that config file which Nuke uses as well. So they live in the same world. So you can totally do that. A more recommended approach is to download this. So you just here click and download this thing and store this on your desktop or on your computer somewhere. And I have this, for instance, stored in my little nerdy section on my computer, which is under color, which I've stored under this path, OCIO 1.03. And you can see this is pretty much the same thing, which is in here, right? Bakelets, Python, readme, blah, blah, blah. So this is the same folder structure. And what I'm doing, instead of just using the default ones which ship with different CCCs, I always don't know if it's 100% the same ones, or there might be a different version, or there might be something custom to this. So what I always do, I download this file, which is the config.ocio file. And then, for instance, in Maya, you can go to Window Preferences, go to the color management. I hope this is actually fine because I had to scale the UI a bit just for you guys to see it better. And within the color management tab, you can just specify that path, and then you get all these funky things in here too. So this is my default setup nowadays. So I'm always reading this. And if you're not 100% sure what a bed file is, I have a video about it somewhere. It explains how to use bed files to set up your DCCs. And this is one of those. So this is my Maya bed file, which, as you can see at the bottom here, can I do this? Yeah. So at the bottom here, you can see that I'm setting a variable OCIO, and I'm passing it this path here, which is reading the OCIO config file. And so whenever I launch Maya using this bed file, I'm setting a few different things, my own plugin path, license paths, Python paths, and whatnot. And then I'm setting also the OCIO path. So that way, I don't need to worry about whenever I open the software that I don't have the right profiles installed or color profiles. So it will always default to this. So this is the setup I have in Maya. And Nuke has this, I think, the same. I did not test it out now, but I'm sure it should have something very similar to this. So you can see this defaults to ACES 1.03, which is exactly the same as I use as well. So you can also do a custom one and choose the same config, but I know for a fact that these are the same things, reading the same ACES config files. So the good thing is now my DCCs are the same. So let's say my COM pipeline, which is in my little demo case, is Nuke, has exactly the same profiles as Maya. And if you're lucky enough to have a monitor which actually is able to display this data, or at least display a different color profile, like a P3, which my monitor has, I can also visualize it on my monitor, I can see more. I cannot see more color, but I can definitely see that there is more detail. There's more light bouncing around, and this DCI P3 is a white balance as well. It's a D60 color white point, helps to visualize that. And I will show a few demos in Maya in a bit, and at least how to do all this. I'm not sure with what Nuke 12 ships, honestly. I'm not even sure if there is a 1.1 already. Maybe not from SPI, not from Sony, probably. I don't know. There's a few more links. Maybe there's something. So this is actually the repo they have. I don't think so. So this is the one I'm using, right? So I'm using ACES 103, which is the Academy Color encoding system, which is pretty much what everyone should be using. So I don't know if there's a newer thing. So are there any questions about all this? Like, I was rambling a bit around about this, but feel free to post any questions if you have anything. So one is, what monitor do you recommend? So if you're serious about color stuff, and I don't know, if you need to have accurate representation, it's always good to have a monitor which can display that. So if it can support P3 color spaces, if it has 10-bit, it's recommended. Nowadays, at least it is. But these monitors are expensive, honestly, and for normal use, it's maybe a bit much. So I'm pretty sure you can get away with not having a 10-bit color-proof monitor if you just do your student projects or anything similar. If you want to do your work and sell your stuff, or actually do something proper with your work, if you work maybe from home for a company or something, you should have a proper monitor. Yeah, I linked the OCIO things above. I think I can actually pin them somehow. Oh, let me just do this again and put it all in one post. And can I then pin it? Maybe unpin this. Sorry, let's see if I can unpin this thing here and unpin something else. Does that work? Not even sure if I can pin stuff. No, I don't know. Yeah, ISO is pretty good. There's ACES is pretty good. NECs are pretty good. So they have good DELs. I heard not the best things about DELs, but they have very good monitors. So check that out. That's for sure. And then, okay, let me just share this download thing for this guy again, which is at least the one which you can download. And I can see if I can pin this. Why can't I pin this guy? Never mind. All right. So let's just jump quickly into Nuke just to explain how you would convert stuff, right? So this is a default sRGB texture, which I just bring in. You get that from the internet or wherever you use to capture that, whatever it is. This is a sRGB texture map. And it comes in and it automatically knows that it is utility sRGB texture. So the OCIO framework is clever enough to read the data in and know, or most of the time know, what color space this is captured in. And if you know it as sRGB and it doesn't update it, you can always do it. You can override it. So this would be an utility sRGB texture. This is what this is, and this is how it is recognized. So OCIO ships with a few nodes as in Nuke, OCIO color space. So what this node enables you to do is to convert textures. And it does it very simply, I think. So you have the OCIO color space node. You know what comes in. It's a utility sRGB, which is this guy. And you know as what you wanted to output it. And you want it as an ACES CG output. So you go here, ACES CG. And the result looks like this. You would think, what is this now? Why is this so dark? But this is pretty much what I was talking about, that it pretty much is a linear format which helps the renderer know what the raw albedo colors are. It doesn't, it feels like it's just like a stopping down of something. I'm not sure 100% what it does behind the scenes. I'm sure it adjusts the curves a bit. But this is the result. And you write that out to a file, to disk, and I just call this now underscore ACES here. So, and I changed my color space in my output to ACES CG. So this is how it will be exported. And then you just render that to disk. And if I bring this now in, let's see if I can actually do that. It should come in as the ACES CG thing. Let's see if it does that. I think it doesn't recognize this. You see that's a problem. I know that that Maya does recognize this. So this is now how it's coming in as the ACES CG version. And you should do that with your textures if you want to do a proper ACES workflow. And you can do the same thing with HDRIs, right? So if I bring in my typical HDRI here, let's see if I find that. I did the same with a few maps I have as well. Let's see, which one can I use here? This one. And I don't think there's much difference with the HDRI. So this one, you can see now this one comes in automatically as ACES CG. And this is an ACES CG converted HDRI, which, as you can see, has all the color you need, all the ranges in here. It's also, I think, 16 or at least 32-bit. You can see it's not clamping. This is the full spectrum. And yeah, obviously it goes up into the wide spectrum as well. So yeah, you do that. You write all them. Yeah, you're right. I think as well I'm converting it twice. So that's why it was maybe a bit dark. I should have maybe kept this to default. So that doesn't matter really. So now back in Maya, what you need to do, you can first, when you import files, you can apply default patterns or default rules. So the default rule, what does it say? I'm actually not sure. I think it just tries to understand what is written out into the metadata and apply that. And or you can do different things. So you can add also custom rules if you want to do that. Right now, I'm just saying everything is in ACES CG. So ideally, this is what it's supposed to be. You should not be really mixing up these color spaces really. So unless you bring in a texture from the web and you know it's sRGB, you obviously you will change it. And honestly, I do that quite a lot. Like I'm sometimes just too lazy to do that. But for certain kind of things, you would need to do that to actually get the benefit of this ACES workflow. And yes, it is that's the thing what I said, that it's pretty much embedded. If you get textures from the web which are sRGB, it is embedded. You do not have more range by converting it. So that's what I said. If you capture images, you should make sure you capture them properly in the full spectrum, or at least in 10 bits, so you get a bit more color. So obviously, yes, that is what is right, that it's embedded. The thing though is, if you convert it, it's just, you don't need to mess around with color spaces all the time. You just convert it and it's ACES CG. Even though it's limited, it looks like that, right? I think you can do that in Nuke non-commercial too. I'm not 100% sure on that. Actually. All right, so let's try something. So let's create a plane here in Maya. Let's make it, so that's 1 centimeter, make it maybe 150 by 150. So that's 1.5 meters. Let's bring in a file texture node like this. And load in this file. I should have here. So I have this here, which is the ACES CG one. I bring it in, it comes in as ACES. So that's the one I converted. Let's just maybe rename this. I have a little helper here which renames all my nodes. Nice. And then I have a surface texture from Arnold standard surface shader. I hook it up, make sure my base is on 1. And I have actually the same for my shader name, so I can just do AI floor, and I can run this guy again, convert the shading engines. All right, so let's see if it does do it. I guess it does not display it properly, at least not in here. Well, there's a bit more range. Let's see what else we can do. Yeah, I thought the viewport supports it a bit better. All right, anyways, let's just disable that. All right, so if I would render this now, let's just create a light first. So if I create a white dome light, hit render. It should be fairly dark, right? And this is not what you would expect with a dome light of 1. You would expect it to be pretty bright, I think. Let's just see if my cores are low enough. Okay, I just don't want to mess up the stream if I have all my threads working on this. Let's just do this. Okay. All right, but you can still see there's still the color in here. So if I disable the spec, you can see that 2 steps up, you can still see there is all this detail. All right, so the benefit of this now, if you blast light on this, you need a lot more light intensity to actually get something working. So instead, if I create a directional light, which is a sunlight, and I point this on the surface like this, and I hide my dome light, my dome light, hide it, everything gets black, and now I need to boost it. So you can definitely boost the intensity, but I always tend to boost the exposure, something like this. So if you put in something in the sunlight, it gets most of the time, if it's like a 12 p.m. sun, it blasts away any color. It's like almost white. So if you put in, for instance, a white sphere, it should just be really, really bright. So if I assign a shader to this, it should be super bright, and it is super bright, which is accurate, but you do not know what is accurate, what color response is accurate, right? It's super hard to judge. So what another standard is in VFX is they have gray spheres and they have chrome spheres, right? And what they do with that is it's kind of for them a measuring tool to know how much light comes back, or at least in CG on the computer in the end, it's easier to match something. So pretty much what happens quite a lot is that you have a gray sphere which has a value of 0.18, which is like this, right? And this value here is supposed to be now a mid-gray tone. So this is pretty much how you can calibrate it. So you still have your gray tones here on the sides, but it still gets blasted. If you hold a gray sphere in the sun, it will not look gray to your eye. It will still look really blasted, especially on the sun side. But on the shadow side, it will be super crunchy, right? So if you have this setup, and especially for interior lighting, which is kind of the title of this video, it is important that you have exact sun values. But that you don't know what this exact sun values are. It's like there's haze in the environment, it can be cloudy, it can be overcast and whatnot. But I have read quite a few papers about this, and the sun, at least when it's in a 12, like a noon position, it gets super bright, and you get values up to 60,000, even sometimes a bit more, 65,000. But typically the average is around 50, maybe 45,000 based on haziness and nowadays pollution, right? So if I would create a little thing here, a little cube, which should be my room. So this is now 1.5 meters room, which is definitely a very small box. We can just make this a bit larger quickly. So 150, let's make it 300 and maybe 600 wide and move it up. All right, so this would be now my room, which is also getting blasted. So let's just first check if the stream is still alive. You guys have been very quiet. I'm not sure if it's still going here. Let's just double check here. Let's do this. Well, feel free to ask any questions, so that way I know that everything is still cooking here. All right, live session. Let's check it out. Seems it's still going. All is good. I wasn't sure if it really caught up, like because I'm rendering all the time. I'm not sure if it's limiting the upload or the encoding. But it seems to be fine. Anyways, okay, continuing. So let's just do some very, very basic extrusions here just to get some kind of light in this window here. Something like that. And we just do, I could have done a better job by subdividing it or inserting edge loops beforehand. But I'm just doing this now. So 1, 2, 3, 4 windows. Let's do extrude again. Offset them, keep them together off, and just delete them. Okay. All right. So if I create a camera now, create a camera from view, look through the camera, change my settings on this to be more fish-eyed. So maybe 18. Zoom in here, go in here. So now I see my nice little lofty apartment. And call this main cam. Like that, right? So you guys, I guess, know that Arnold is struggling a bit with this kind of stuff. Interior lighting is not the strength of Arnold just because it needs a lot, and I mean it, a lot of rays to actually produce proper light bounces. Yeah, this will stretch the texture now, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's just move it to here, and maybe I should save it to scenes. And let's hit render. All right, so you can see now, ooh, there's something going on, but there's nothing on the walls. If you look at the wall with your eye, or when you look in your room around yourself, you can see there is light everywhere. There's nothing really black in there, just because everything is bouncing. Yeah, so what's going on? So you can see if I look from inside it, you can see there's something going on, but it's really, really, really bad. So let's just assign a standard surface shader. You can see it got better. Standard surface shader a bit better. Make sure it's on 1. So this is pretty much what's happening, right? So you can see it gets super noisy. And it does not really want to resolve. And even like I don't have much render settings going on here. And not much samples. So that is definitely one problem. And I can tell you there's not much magic. You need to push your samples a lot to get clean results. But a few little tricks which we can still do. So one thing which Arnold does is to optimize its fireflies and its clamping issues. Its sampling issues. And what it does, it actually clamps your indirect bounces. And it does that to optimize your scene, so there's not so much energy being bounced off all the time. So within clamping, you can see that the indirects are being clamped at a value of 10. If I put this to 1, you can see that the noise is gone, but there's also not more light going on, because once the light hits off the surface, the energy which gets bounced off is only limited to a value of 1. But as I said before, if the sun has a value of, let's say, 50,000, it's impossible that the floor absorbs all that energy and only bounces off 1 value back, right? It needs to bounce a lot more energy back, and this clamp here would limit that. So what you can do, you can just I'm not sure. It should be pretty much equivalent to your sun intensity, but I don't know. You can try maybe, I don't know, let's try 40,000. So now you can see everything got super bright here, right? Just because of that, which does not help really solving things. But then another thing is diffuse bounces, ray depth. So what we say, or what is limited right now, the ray hits the surface, it bounces off once, and it bounces off twice, and it dies. In real world, doesn't happen. It bounces until the energy is lost, which we currently do not do here. So what you can do, you can definitely boost up your diffuse bounces and make sure your total bounces are equally high, like that. So now it's still very messy. The problem is we don't have enough diffuse samples, and we are just 3 AA samples, 1 diffuse samples. So not much going on here. So what I would suggest, boost up your AA samples, depending on if you want to run a depth of field or not. Boost that guy up, and then you need a lot more diffuse samples to clean this image up. So let's see if this actually does anything better. It takes a bit of time to get the final steps in. But this is currently what we have, and it's not perfect. Honestly, it's not. So this is also based on your sun intensity. So even though now your eye exposes to this differently, if you are indoors, you would not see like these black shadows. Honestly, you wouldn't. And this is just because your eye adjusts. It's like it has a dynamic range of everything. So essentially what you would need to do is you would need to boost the sunlight even more. Let me just see what the shader is on this guy. I think we do have bounce. Let's just get rid of the specs for now. So in turn, to get it even better, you need also a skylight, because what you see is not just the sun. Oh, good question about the portal lights. So I want to talk about that as well. There's a weird misconception, or not misconception, but I would say a kind of issue with that. It does help to redirect the rays, but yeah, I'll talk into this a bit more detail. So I think, yeah, you might be right that I messed up something with the conversion here. But let's leave it for now. Like in my little render here, I did not do that actually. No, let me just bring that up. I just want to show you actually the result of this. One second. Images, almost there. So this here, as you can see, is using the same thing. And I did not actually do this conversion to CG because I think I did it twice, as someone suggested in the chat. So let's just see what happens if I actually change it. And I didn't even convert it to TXR, so that might be also some startup time issues we had. So let's just use this one quickly and see what's happening with this. And I think this actually also will use the TXR files. Sorry, the TX files. Yeah, so this is now reading it in as a, it's still using ACES workflow, but it's specified as a correct map. Let's just make sure it is actually. So where is it? Too many things in here. Okay, let's try this again. You can see now I got a lot brighter. So this is now, it's still using the ACES workflow, but we're just saying this texture is because it's clamped to an sRGB gamma, which is because it's an internet texture. You can just specify to OCIO or to the renderer that this is a sRGB texture, and it will still handle it the right way. And you can see now everything got a lot brighter just because of that change. So I think we might have gone a bit too much on the exposure. Let's see what values we have here. So in the sun here, we have values of, I'm looking at the bottom, we have values of ranging from 6 to 8. And in the shadow, it's 0.2, which is a bit low. But the walls are pretty white, right? So we have a fairly white wall right now set up. So the next step to do is to add an ambient light, and we should be doing that. You can use the physical sky, or you can just use something like this, but ideally I would recommend you create the physical sky, hide the other skydome light we just had, and make sure that you disable the sun. Where is it? In the physical sky. You don't want the sun here. And then you can just boost it until you see the correct bounce of this surface here. Does it actually have a spec? It does not have specs. All right. So with that enabled, now you can see that you can actually see the sky is being reflected on the floor. And you can also see that this is bouncing off everywhere. So you make the renderer happy by giving it more and more samples to work with. Right? And you can even push this because there is a lot more ambient lighting around you than you would expect. So let's just push this up a bit further. So we have an intensity of 5. We can go maybe to 7 or even 8. So this is only now diffuse lighting. There's no direct light, and you can see even that helps already to fill up the room with light. And another thing is it does help to create more holes in your objects. Like even in your home, you have lots of doors which all bounce off light and which give you more light to bounce off in the scenes. So keep that in mind too. It just does help to create more little openings in your scenes. No, did I not extract it? Not sure. I think it's doubling up here. Yeah. Okay. So now we have another little hole here which lets some light in. If I render now, you should see that there's even more light coming in, and you can see the ceiling is getting lit up now just because we have this light from the side here. And I can move the camera a bit closer forwards. And I will have a dedicated tutorial about this interior lighting scene. But I just want to show you the setup with this guy for now. Okay, you can see now this is only indirect. So if I bring back the directional light, you can see now it's super bright, but it's getting somewhere now, right? It's very warm. There's not much weirdness anymore. Let's just reduce this slightly. And you always want to try to get the correct colors back. So right now, our wall texture is fully white. Our wall, so it's fully white. You don't have white in real life, really. I think the whitest white is 0.94, if I remember, and I think that's pure snow. So typically your average wall color might be around 0.8. So you should try to get something similar back if you want to expose correctly. So this is now obviously bouncing off the sunlight and everything. But yeah, it's bouncing off the floor as well. So if you change your directional light now, you get different results. Obviously you will get less bounce at some point. So now you can see it gets really dark, but you still get the ambience because it's bouncing off, and you have this ambient light everywhere. If you blast it in directly on the walls, you should see it being a lot brighter, right? Like this. Please check the clamp value. Not sure what that means. So if I clamp it back to 2, you see you lose all the energy again. So this is pretty much a lot darker, right? So yeah, it's another quick question. How do you know what the sun intensity is, right? It's a valid question. Like, how would you measure that? But a good way of doing this is to actually measure it, and not with a little light meter, but what you can do, you can measure, or you can actually take a camera outside. Let me actually just find that if I actually do find it. There's like a nice little article about us capturing the sun. I'm just looking on my second monitor. In the meantime, we can actually render this quickly. Capturing the sun. Okay. So how you capture the sun, you would use the same or similar approach how you would capture a regular HDRI, but you cannot, with a regular camera, you cannot capture the full range of the sun, right? It's impossible because the camera only has, I think, 12 stops or maybe 16, I don't know. But the sun's whole range is more or less 24 stops. So it has 24 different stops until fully bright till fully black. So what you would do, you would use an ND filter, which is pretty much like a black glass, which you put in front of your lens, which enables you to have the camera capture more like in a darker kind of, it's like offset in a more darker range, I would say. So you capture with your regular camera with these 5 EV stops and 2 brackets, with those 5 brackets using 2 EV stops. So you get 12 stops, and then you put the ND filter on top and you do this again. Right? And then you merge them all together, and then you can bring it, you merge them together in Photomatix or in any other different merging software. And then the color values you get back from that are super high. So it's around 40K or 50K, depending about the haze or the sun position in the sky. So I will share these two guys as well, which you can have a look to, which is also very helpful if you want to get the right color ranges and whatnot, like this. Okay, so let's see what this, so it's still cooking, but you can see now, even like this little setup here, you can see that we get a nice white room. We get nice shadows where there's supposed to be shadows, and we get the light bouncing around. Obviously, all of this needs some fine tuning. And what also does help, if you give your lights more samples as well. Don't go overboard. It all depends on your AA samples you have. But what I like to do for the sun is to create softer shadows. So we can specify an angle of 205 or something like that, which produces some softer shadows, which is just a nice feeling to all of this, right? Like that, softer shadows here. Okay, so then now let's just talk about a different approach of doing this. And there are different approaches of doing this. For instance, portal lights was mentioned in the chat just now. So I was saying it's not a good idea to use portal lights because they pretty much fake the light transport. And you would use portal lights without directional lights, right? So the sky dome light now is pretty much a HDRI, right? And this one doesn't have the sun. So if I would bring in the sun in here, and I think we need to find where it's supposed to be now. It's coming in here. Sun is coming in there. So this would be now a physical physical sun and sky. So what you can do, you can use portal lights. Arnold does not have a physical camera thing here. So all of this is, I see the confusion. So no, it does not have it. You do not, well, you have something similar, I guess, but it's, let's see, what do you have here? You just have exposure in here, but you do not have physical camera controls. So for instance, Maxwell, they have it, and you should set it to the correct colors, to the correct ISO if you want it to be. All right, so portal lights. If I create a portal light, what it does, it redirects the rays, the light rays from the outside, from the big HDRI, and it redirects them using the portal into your scene, like this. You can see now things have changed. And what it does, if you have objects close to this portal light, they get more range, more color than they would be in the far, just because there's a fall off to this. And which means that you kind of have a different fall off. It, like, ever as close to the windows will get a lot brighter. And what I see people do as well is, instead of using this kind of workflow, they use area lights. And they put them in front of the windows. Let's see if I can show that as well. And I know why it was done, and it was at that time a good thing to do that. But now, or at least I can only speak for Arnold right now, is they changed the way area lights lose their energy. They changed it from a non-physical way to a physical way, which is exponential, it's quadratic fall off, which they hard-coded to all the lights. So if I disable the sun again, we only get the environment light. And if I put my area light in here, first of all, having these big area lights will cause very soft shadows because they are so large. The sun is actually very, 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 very tiny compared to an area light. It's like, it's almost the size of a needle head or something like that, right? So first of all, area lights, they do not make really sense because you can see it already. You get super soft shadows. But now you want to get some exposure on the floor, right? So obviously you would boost it, let's say 12 stops, 15 stops. So now you can see what's going on. And I've seen people do this, and you can easily tell it's full CG because you get exactly this phenomenon here. Super bright, falling off very fast. And that is the nature of an area light. It is super intense close to the surface. And I bet if you would fly to the sun, you would get the similar condition. You would burn away the closer you get to the sun because it gets every so hotter the closer you get to it. But the Earth is super, super, super far away from the sun. So to mimic this effect, what we could do, or what you should do in this case, put the area light very far away, make sure that your spread is super low, which is kind of a cone angle to this area light. Try to aim for your little window and blast the exposure up by, I don't know, by a lot, by maybe 24. And then you get a similar thing, right? You're blasting it. You don't get this weird fall off anymore because it's super far away. And this is a way of doing it. But again, if you use an area light, you shoot rays. Like an area light is known for its 180 degree spread of samples. So by using the spread, you reduce the spread of the rays to 20 degrees, I guess it is, or 20% of 180, whatever that is, and you still lose samples. So why just not use a direct light, which doesn't have, it is a linear light pretty much. There's no fall off to this. And you use that and you get a lot better results. Like this. Let's see if everything is still in order. Yeah, and you still have the shadow softness and you don't have that weird fall off because it's close. You can put it wherever you want. It's an infinite light and it will not calculate rays which go past the surface. So this is definitely a way which you should be doing, or that's how I understand it at least. You should be doing it and not using area lights. Unless obviously it is a nighttime scene and you have localized light. So if I would hide my sun, the moon is not that bright, or at least the sky at night is not that bright. So we could lose the intensity here. Go back to 3 maybe. But you still see reflections even at night. Maybe not as strong as this. But then obviously if you are indoor, yes, you have light sources which do exactly that. So you put an area light in here, move it up, and maybe make it a what do we have? This make it a cylinder, so it's pretty much like a neon tube or something. And then it's totally legit to do that, right? It's just if you want to light an interior scene with sunlight, it's not a good idea to use area lights for that because it's not physical. So if I boost this up now by... And I agree with Nicholas. It is a guessing thing until you get the right results you want. So this would be obviously now some kind of light. And you can see even just by doing this, using this ACES setup, you can see that it is working. You get the bounce everywhere, but it's not bright enough. Like you would need to boost it to get a correct response here. So I don't know, let's try maybe 14. And you can see now just by doing that, you get the nice light hitting it. It's actually lighting up the environment. But again, like I'm not sure exactly what a light bulb values has, but they range from 200 to, I don't know, 15, maybe not 15,000, but like 12,000 units, at least in this kind of space, right? So, but as again, like Nicholas said, it is a guessing game. You should really know how things look in the real world and replicate them. It's not so easy to get exactly the right pipeline, I think. Why aren't the settings? So if everything just like light decay is physical, why aren't the settings? So I know that earlier versions of Arnold, there was an option to change the fall off from linear to quadratic, to exponential to quadratic, but they removed it. So all the light fall off is quadratic, which is physical. This is how light falls off. It's the inverse square law. And this is what is built in here. The only thing which doesn't have it is the directional lights. And I think even you cannot change anything here. Right, so this is kind of the idea behind that. Yeah, so, and I will have a little tutorial about this, how I set this one up. This will be a bit more about look dev and lighting, obviously. Like I just want to create those shaders and create a nice representation of the scene in a tutorial, but it's pretty much based off the same idea I just showed you. And you can still see it is a bit noisy. Oops, let's go back. There we go. Yes, you can add blockers, but this is again, yeah, everything is then again just breaking physicality, right? So lights do not fall off in a linear way. So you could do that. Yes, I just didn't really want to present these options just because it will not help you much. But again, you do not have the option to say, oh, I want it to fall off quadratically, right? I'm not sure if the light blocker has any more options than this. I don't think so. No, it doesn't. Yeah, so there's no real way of just doing this, I guess. So this is where's my sun? Yeah, and then this is pretty much how it is. And what does help, and I can only encourage to have a look at this, is to read through these things to understand what the benefit is of having all these different options in here. And obviously you have different options in here. You can view it in different kind of LUTs as well. So this is right now viewing it in sRGB, which most of the monitors would display it as, but internally it still uses all the different kind of light energy which it has. But I like to view it in P3, and you can see everything changes slightly. I'm not sure how much it's visible on the stream right now, but it did change a bit. And then you have different kind of intensities, different kind of nit values. So if your monitor supports that, if you have 4000 nit monitor, I don't think it exists. I think I have 1000 nit monitor. So if you do this, you can see everything gets again darker, and then you can push your values again a lot further, and you can generate even more energy to your whole scene. Right, so I could go now on 8 or even 12, right? And now this is white, and now everything it gets super washed out, but you can see there's just so much more color to this. And I'm just curious now, if I switch this to this different kind of texture, what happens? Let's double check this. So that is interesting. I might need to explore this a bit more. So this is now using, I'm not sure if it's using the right double exposed one, but this is now viewing it in D60 white balance, and it's a P3 gamut. So it looks still very washed out. I'm not sure if it's working well. I don't think it is working well. Anyways, go back to this and change the texture back. And yes, I think the tutorial I will be setting up is how do you set the things up properly, like at least the tutorial about this. So most of this is not really textured, so the only textured pieces are the leaves, the posters in the back, and the floor, and I think all the rest is just simple shading, so there's not much to it. Let's just reduce the directional light. Yeah. Ooh, way too bright. I think now I messed it up completely. I'm not sure. I think I changed some word setting. What did I do? Yeah, anyways. I think I messed up the colors now. Oh yeah, it's still on ACES, which it shouldn't be. Okay, so feel free to ask any questions, and I will try to answer them now if they show up in time. Otherwise, this is more or less all I wanted to explain or display, is just how to see the benefits of all this. Well, I can't really make a tutorial about shader writing just because I would not feel comfortable doing so, because I do not have the knowledge to create a proper shader. I can do OSL shading, yes, but in a very, very basic way. It's more like utility shading in OSL, so that's something else. Nicholas asked if I can make a tutorial on how to set up look diff scenes, and that again is, I can do it. It's not that easy though, and I guess you know that it's not that easy. It's not that easy because everything needs to be captured properly. You need to have an exactly properly captured environment. You need to have your exact matching Macbeth charts. You need to have your spheres and everything. You need to know, for instance, what albedo color has your gray sphere. Is it a reflection of 18%, or is it less? You need to know all that, and all this stuff is not so easy to come to. So all we can do here, or what I can do, is like estimate stuff, right? I put a value of 0.18, which is an estimate. Then I pretty much eyeball everything. It's not, there is no exact formula right now to create 100% accurate renderings, or at least not as I know it. Yeah, I worked in a few productions, and most of them nowadays, they try to use the standard, which is OpenColor.io. So sometimes you work in ACCG, then you convert that, you do like a grade into a different color space, just like have a working space. So everything you get from the plates, every texture or every camera plates you get back are in that same working space, and then you just do your lighting. You looked at your lighting, everything in the same space, and in the end you apply the grade, which is then sent to the client pretty much. And the idea is that everyone is pretty much using the same standard, so everything is, it's a uniform color pipeline. Yeah, it's a crazy topic, Nicholas. Like, and there's still so much to explore. And if you follow like Anis Langlands or all these guys working in the field, it's super interesting what they come up with. And ICT stuff, all these kind of things, they create or clear angle scans or ICT scans. All this is to help generating better pictures, right? Yeah, it's not just by, no, there is actually, the question from Toxophila was, he doesn't see a difference between ACES workflow and sRGB workflow. So the thing is, I'm not sure how you test it, but if I switch this now to sRGB, here it is not actually the sRGB you would have without ACES. This is just a view transform, which kind of brings the gamut back down to sRGB, but it still used the ACES stuff, like the wider color ranges to generate those pixels. If you would go in your settings here, color settings, no, not color settings. If you would go into your system settings and you would disable this OCIO color pipeline and have everything in sRGB or whatever you had before, and you render the same image, you should definitely see a difference. Pretty sure. Okay, I'm trying to follow up here. Yes, thank you. So could you please explain the difference between intensity and exposure? I can try, and I think it's easier to show it in Nuke probably. Well, we can try it in here. Well, so if I'm in Nuke here and I have a texture, I have a grade like that, right? I view this. So if I multiply this, this is just getting, this is now on 2, it's twice as bright, 3 times as bright, right? 5 times as bright, 10 times as bright. So this is multiplies exactly intensity, right? It's just whatever you have, you multiply the value by that number. So it's a linear multiplication, linear intensity. Exposure is using quadratic, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So if you go to stops, one stop from 0 to 1 means this is double intensity. So from 0 is what the default is. If you put one exposure or one stop, it gets twice as bright. If you put 2 stops, it gets 4 times as bright. 3 and this is now already 8 times as bright. So if I did my math right, I hope 8 and exposure of 3 should be equivalent. It's the same thing, right? And exposure is used in the camera. So in every DSLR camera, you have exposure. So it's called EV, and it's just the way it used to be. It's on film camera. So you'll hear DP saying, "Oh, bring it down half a stop, bring it up half a stop," which means just make it a bit darker or a bit lower, right? So if I go from 0 and make it a quarter stop brighter, this is how it would look like. And a quarter stop, I'm not actually sure what it is. Is it twice as bright? No, it can't be. It needs to be, maybe. We'll see. Right, so this is pretty much the idea. So exposure is just a different way, an easier way to control intensities, or at least for me, especially like you can see, like if you have a sunlight which has 22 stops, right? You put it in here, you get values of super high. Well, what is it? 16,000, I think it is. So to get the same color, maybe let's go not go that extreme. Let's go maybe 18. So now we have 40,000 in red here on this texture, on this picture, right? So if I stop it down, you cannot even display it here in Nuke, I guess. And we don't need to. We can just check the color values. But to get the same effect, you would need to have a very, very high multiplication to get this. 2,000, 20,000. So this is 200,000 units now, and I think it's pretty close to my exposure. You see, so you would have, if you want to have the exact same response in the renderer, you would need to put in an intensity of 200,000, or you put in, it has a range of 22 or 18 stops. So this is pretty much the difference here. Hope that's clear now. I'm not sure. I actually wanted to do that before I went to Nuke. Yeah. All right, let's see what else questions we have. You say RT or SRGB. I'm just trying to go through the questions. Yeah, obviously if you work with physical lights, you should also work in physical units. So it doesn't make sense if you have a, I don't know, a room which is normally 10 meters and you have a scene scale of, I don't know, 10 centimeters of this. So you should definitely try to make everything in the as close as possible if you want to go for photorealistic renderings. Yeah, Nicholas, you can do that. You can capture the sphere in sunlight and replicate that, but unless you know what albedo color the gray sphere is, it will still be eyeballing it. In theory, you're right. I agree, but you would need to know exactly what the color is, right? So, and you can get it. You can buy proper gray spheres which have a specific albedo which you can apply, and you should get the same results. Totally. Yeah, if you wanted this foam shader, which is from Shaders XYZ from Xeno, you can go to that website, and I think they have some OSL stuff in there. Let's see. I mean, yeah. Okay, so this has been a long stream today, and again, I'm not a color guy. I can just pretty much explain what I know right now, and this is pretty much that. So every day I'm learning things and getting better, or not better, depends. But I'm learning things and I'm trying to get better. And this is I ask questions at work, I ask questions on forums, I'm active, and I'm just trying to fully understand stuff. So I would recommend for everyone, if you want to get into this, do that. Like, get more knowledge. Try to learn these color things, these weird different color spaces and whatnot. It's super complex, and it can get super super hard to understand what's going on if you don't have a PhD in that field. But it's still worth checking out. It just helps you overall knowledge about all this. Yeah, I think Hossein, you're right. I doubled it up with the color space to write it as ACES and to change the color space. And I agree. I think that's what happened. So last question, what happens with animation scene where you are outside and get into the room? So yes, this is a problem. If you have a camera, you expose it to the outside, which is very bright. So everything, you expose the camera down to capture the color. You go inside, everything is pitch black because you expose for the outside, right? Your eye is clever enough to adapt for these changes. So you go inside, you see light, you go outside, you don't see everything white, right? Photo cameras have that problem, and they try to reduce that effect using HDR, which is the new term they sell in electronics, like HDR monitors, this and that. It just means it's a 10-bit guy, pretty much, a 10-bit range or 12-bit range or even higher. And again, I'm not sure. I think the eye sees 16 stops difference. Don't quote me on that, but it's definitely more than a camera can do. And ACES has a wider gamut, so potentially yes, you would not see this drastic change going from light to dark if you set it up properly, because you just have more information, right? That's at least the idea. All right, so last questions. Yeah, please share those links. I would highly appreciate that if you can just share this stuff. These links to Chris Brayjohn's section of ACES. And yeah, I have a few ones up here. I have the FX PhD one, I think, up here. Where is it? Here, this guy. It's just about the ACES stuff, though. But still a good read. It's interesting. So yeah, feel free to check it out. And yeah, so the next tutorial I think will be about that room if I feel enough motivated to do this. But you can see already, just by setting this up, you get the idea. And again, be sure to go to your render settings and make sure that you remove this clamping, because it is clamping it by a lot. So you can see if I clamp it by 5, how dark it gets, right? You're losing all the energy. So this is 10, which is the default. And if I put in, let's say 10,000, you can see now how much brighter everything gets, just because the energy is still bouncing. And if I go one more step, you shouldn't see much of a difference, but there is still a slight difference in here depending on your sun intensity. Yeah, so I think I talked about all the things I wanted to. And yeah, I actually forgot to do that. Let's see, wait. Which is something I plan to do and I keep forgetting, is adding a little button here, which is full there now in your face. So I don't really like to like ask for this, but it does help my channel. If you like what I'm doing, and even though if it's not on PhD level, at least for the color pipeline, I would still appreciate the support on subscribing. So yeah, 20 stops. Thank you for checking it out. So yeah, you can see, so if the eye can see 20 stops, you have definitely a way more capable camera in your head to process all these problems we face with our cameras right now. Anyways, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope this was helpful to some. And yeah, so I will see you, I guess, in the next live session, or it might just be the next tutorial. But thanks again for tuning in, and I need to find the end stream button. There it is. Okay, see you guys. Thanks for joining. Goodbye.